I just started recording. Yep, and we will begin. The screen share is not, I'm sorry, hang on.
Okay.
Everything's not cooperating.
All right, we good to go?
Yep.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome, community members and media partners. We're so happy to have you today at Stories of AC, as well as Outlier Media and Free Press for our City Needs Assessment Info Share. My name is Christina Noble, and I'm the project manager for Stories of Atlantic City. We also have on the call with us today some of our team members, who is Toby Rosenthal, who serves as the program coordinator for Stories of AC, Marissa Luca, who is our multimedia content producer, Erin O'Hanlon, who is one of our Stockton partners, Vanessa Maria Graber, who is the manager for News Voices, which is a program housed under Free Press, Mike Rispoli, who is the News Voices director, and Sarah Alvarez, who is the founder and executive editor for Outlier Media. You'll hear more from them shortly. Toby, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So before we jump into all the good stuff, I just want to review our agenda as well as go over a few housekeeping items. So first, we will be doing our welcome and introductions, which we're doing now. I'll give you a few minutes after this as well to introduce yourselves because we want to know who's on the call with us. Next, we'll go into what Stories of Atlantic City is for those who may not know or may not be familiar with us. Then we're going to jump into the why. Why are we here today? What is the point of this meeting? Next, we'll overview Free Press's planned work. Then we'll go into Outlier Media's presentation and discussion of the AC Needs Assessment Survey, the data they collected from that. Then we'll go into a community conversation in which we'll break out into breakout rooms and together try to find some solutions for these information gaps. And then we'll end with a lightning round of resources. I know we have some partners from the community here on the call today that may just want to share some resources for immediate needs for people in the community. As for housekeeping items, this event is being recorded as you see. Please inform us if you do not consent to this. We'll try to accommodate you as best we can. Also, please be sure to stay muted unless you're addressing the crowd. We really want to cut down on that background noise. And lastly, please feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat. We have Marissa, our team member, is going to be checking on the chat and seeing who has questions that we can answer. You can go to the next slide, Toby. So, Stories of Atlantic City, who are we? The purpose of this project is to provide grassroots, community-powered restorative narrative. We know a lot of times when Atlantic City is in the news, it's for something negative or something surrounding the casino district. And we really want to help to shift the narrative of what's typically portrayed of Atlantic. So we work on stories and information sharing that inspires hope, change, and highlights experiences of resiliency despite challenges. We are supported by Stockton University with funding from, I'm sorry, I'm getting some stuff in the way here, with funding from Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation and the New Jersey Local News Lab, I can't speak this morning, fund at the Community Foundation of New Jersey, a partnership of the Dodge Foundation and Democracy Fund. Some of the aspects of Stories of Atlantic City, some of the things that we really push are community organizing and outreach. Some of the ways we've done that so far this year is through our phone tree, which is a model that we adopted from Free Press. And this was a way to share information and to gather information from our community members to see what information they were lacking in this time, especially during the pandemic. We know there's been a digital divide going on, and we really saw that when we had to shift all our events to the virtual world because of the pandemic. So that's one of the great projects we started. Of course, that expanded just from trying to gather information specifically about the pandemic to all the other things that has happened in 2020, because we all know it's been a year. So things from the uprisings to the elections, it really became comprehensive. We've also offered a few workshops about storytelling, which I really loved because I'm an artist. And so we explore different ways in which we can story through workshops and through storytelling. We actually just had one last night surrounding spoken word. It was a wonderful event. And then we also have a few special projects going on with some of our community collaborators. So be on the lookout for some awesome things, some awesome new content coming. Another thing we focus on is traditional and hyperlocal media collaboration. When this project began at its genesis, the goal was to really partner with media partners to highlight these stories of resiliency. And then as we move forward with renewing the project and the pandemic hitting, we really realized that we needed those community grassroots organizations as well to help really push the vital news that people need in the community. So some of the things we've worked on this year thus far is some work with the Press of AC. Just recently, we did a few things regarding the elections, as well as some other work we've done with them in the past. They're one of our top collaborators. We've done some work with Frontrunner New Jersey with the editor, Clyde Hughes. He just published a story about the upcoming NAACP convention that'll be taking place in Atlantic City in 2022. And we're also working with local media content producer to produce stories. Lastly, and most recently, we've been working on some collegiate collaboration. As I stated before, we are supported by Stockton University. So this go round, we were able to bring on some interns, which has been great. I believe we have one of them on the call today, Adriana, who's also a mini journalist herself. She writes for the Stockton student-powered newspaper called the Argo. And they were also able to have some of their work published. They worked with us on the Press of AC election story. So that's exciting. We just have so many wonderful things going on. You can go to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So the why are we here today? So as I stated earlier, when this pandemic hit especially, we really realized that there was a great portion of the community that we still weren't reaching. And we know at a time like now, and it is just so vital for people to have the news that they need to survive. So we wanted to make sure that we could do everything that we can to really supply people with the information that they need in order to survive the challenges for this upcoming year. So we're aiming to find information gaps and accountability gaps. We want to identify, report, and deliver valuable information to empower residents. And we also want to create better community access to resources using various platforms. We want to figure out what are the best ways we can reach the people in the community to get them this information that they really need. So we've done that by, you can advance to the next slide, please, Toby. We've done that by partnering with two organizations, one which is Free Press, who's been one of the collaborators of Stories of AC since its genesis, as well as Outlier Media, with another great organization. And I know Sarah is here to represent. She can tell you a little more about Outlier Media soon. And we did that we gathered this information by an AC needs assessment survey that was sent out early October to AC residents. And we really were just trying to figure out what their needs were. So this was an SMS text survey that spanned over about 2 to 3 days. And within that time, we gathered this information from the residents to see what it is that they really need to know to stay alive and well and healthy. So I'm going to toss to Vanessa Graber of News Voices, and she can tell you a little more.
Thanks, Christina. Hey, I'm Vanessa Maria Graber from Free Press. I manage the News Voices New Jersey project, and I work alongside with journalists and organizers in Atlantic City, Camden, and Newark, although we have a statewide network of community leaders, organizers, people in government, and folks from media organizations all throughout the state. And what we're trying to do with this specific project is respond to the community's information needs during the pandemic. And so really trying to understand what residents' biggest questions are, where the information needs gap exists, and then strategize ways to meet those information needs, either through traditional journalism or through community-based solutions. And so we did a lot of this work in Newark, along with our partners, the Center for Cooperative Media. So shout out to Stephanie Murray and Joe, who are on the call today, where we had a similar convening with the community to identify what the information hierarchy needs are. And a lot of what was reflected in that initial conversation, we then saw reflected in the survey that we did. And so the center actually granted people, community members and media makers, funding to be able to create media projects to respond to those needs. So that is underway, and either Stephanie or Joe maybe can drop a link to the types of projects that were funded, because it is really exciting to see people collaborate with journalists and media makers to respond directly to what people's biggest questions were. And so that's what we'd like to do in Atlantic City. Sarah Alvarez from Outlier Media, who is the director there, led this survey project, and she's going to talk about the methodology they used and what they found when they did additional research, and then what the implications and impact of that are. She also has some ideas and recommendations for where the stories are. So how can journalists then take this information and translate that into coverage or accountability journalism? But we're also interested in solutions that come from community members, people from nonprofit organizations, from government. And what we'd like to do is continue this conversation after this call. So there'll be another meeting in about 2 or 3 weeks where we can actually discuss specific projects that we want to collaborate on. Some newsrooms are really small and they don't have the capacity to maybe take on one of these things on their own. And that's okay. By working together, we can share the workload, and we can also cross promote and widely proliferate any information that we find. So I'm excited to see all of you here and look forward to discussion on what are some of the potential stories that we can pursue with this data. And I'm here to help organize, consult, plan meetings, and look for resources for the group, and just make sure people have everything they need to be able to carry out this work. So Mike Rispoli, who's also here, Director of News Voices, also has a ton of resources and information. So, we're always both available to talk more if people want to talk one-on-one after this. Even if you don't live in Atlantic City, if you're from another part of the state, we're happy to hear from you and learn more about how you'd like to meet the community's information needs during this time. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Alvarez, and she is going to tell you more about this SMS Tech Survey project and the findings from the report that she gathered.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you. It was nice to kind of get started in a Zoom where everybody waves at each other. That's really nice. I feel like that says really good things about Atlantic City. So like Vanessa said, I'm Sarah Alvarez. I live and work in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm the editor and the founder of Outlier Media. We do this type of work. I just want to kind of level set, because what we did here was an information needs assessment to try to figure out what type of information people in Atlantic City really need, right? Like what information gaps are keeping them from being able to meet their basic needs, what kind of information gaps are keeping them from being able to thrive, and what kind of information gaps are indicating to us that there's something bigger going on, right? That it's not just a problem of resources and a lack of information. It's pointing us to some really much larger failures. With that said, so we do these information needs assessments. We do them in Detroit, and we base our work in Detroit off of them. We've done them in several other cities across the country. I feel very confident in our methods and in the quality of work. With that said, I am not from Atlantic City. I don't know Atlantic City. I'm very sensitive to people believing that they know a lot about a place without actually really being there. So when I am going to talk about this data that we have, I'm going to talk about it with confidence. However, there are maybe things that you can't learn from data, right? There's local context that you all have that I think is really important. And I don't want to minimize that at all. When we do these surveys, what we're trying to do is get real people to tell us what their challenges are. We don't ask people like, what type of news do you want? What type of news would be helpful? Because people might not think any news is helpful. We ask them about the challenges that they're facing over the next few weeks, and then we ask them about the challenges that they're facing over the next few months. And we look at that and we say, what is that telling us about the type of information people don't have? We also look at complaint data from the city. We use Freedom of Information Act to get different complaint data from Atlantic City. And then we look at other like census data, United Way 211 call center data, demographic data, and we put all of it together and we put it in this report, which I put in the chat, and you can take a look at that while I'm talking. The purple boxes, if you're doing that, the purple boxes are kind of some of our takeaways, and then our recommendations are on page 6. If you have any questions, it's like a lot of information. We've developed these things over 5 years. So if you have any questions, just let me know, either today or in the future. Okay, next slide. Okay, what I want to say kind of high level is that Atlantic City is a place that is going to be suffering from a lot of information gaps and a lot of accountability gaps. That's because it's predominantly low income, it's predominantly people of color, and it doesn't have a very, it doesn't have like really established accountability work focused on that population. One way that we know that there's a lot of information needs is because there are a lot of resource needs. United Way has this like phone line called 211 where people can call when they don't know, like, I need resources to help pay my rent. I don't know where to get food. I can't figure out where to get online learning help. So not surprisingly, because of the pandemic, that call volume has gone up, but it's gone up really a lot. So if you can just look at this, right, there are more than 4 times as many calls for help with utilities during the pandemic as there were before the pandemic. 5% of all renters in Atlantic City calling for help with rent in 1 month. Those are really stark indicators that there are not enough resources flowing through the community. And it doesn't just mean money, it means information, it means solutions, it means all of those things. So whenever, Detroit is also a low wealth community. And I think we've seen a lot of people pathologize that and just kind of say like, well, there's just not enough money. That's not the problem. The systems aren't working for the people who live there. What we're trying to do is help find exactly why those systems aren't working and exactly what information could do to help those systems work better. So that's, Atlantic City's just seen a lot of spike in the need since the pandemic. Okay, next slide. This is an example of the text survey that we do. This is a real response from Atlantic City, and I appreciate this gentleman's honesty. This is basically what we saw all through the survey. The most common need is money, right? We kind of categorize that as income support and employment, because we also saw that a lot of people saying they needed more hours, they needed more steady work, they needed to be able to access unemployment, but they couldn't because of, you know, they were a gig worker. And so that was the most common issue. I will say there's like a gray screen. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, that's cool. I will say that the Atlantic City is by far the smallest city that we've done this work in. So we did get fewer survey responses than we usually get. We usually get around 50. We got, you know, around 20, and there were slightly fewer than that that were really high quality responses. I don't think that that means that this survey isn't helpful. I don't think that that means that this survey isn't valid. We get, we buy numbers and we get a random selection of people, which, you know, increases the value. But at the same time, we'd be happy to kind of do another kind of like focus group with these questions if you all want to dig into this more deeply, or, you know, you want more confidence in these issues. But I feel very confident that the main problem is that there are not enough resources flowing through Atlantic City, and there's not enough people who are able to access those resources. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the way that we're trying to find these information gaps is like, we're trying to kind of figure out how people who care about getting information to people, whether it's organizers, journalists, community workers, you know, how do you figure out in this world of so much that needs to be done, how to focus your work? So we're looking for 3 different kinds of information gaps that we recommend trying to attack. The first one is like, what is the most prevalent information gap? So if you can fix this one, how can you help the most people? That's one of them. We're also looking at like, what is the most severe information gap, right? Like maybe it doesn't affect the most people, but people who are being affected really need help. There's a lot of harm being caused. So that's the other one that we're looking for. And then, and this is especially true for reporters and for accountability work, what's a kind of atypical information gap? What are we seeing in Atlantic City that we don't see other places? Because that means that something that works other places isn't working in Atlantic City. And that's a red flag. It means like systems aren't working, or there's corruption or something like that. So those are the 3 types of information gaps we look for. Atlantic City, most prevalent gap, unemployment and underemployment. Because of the types of industries that that Atlantic City runs on, those are the types of industries that have been very affected by the pandemic. It's also the type of workers that are in Atlantic City and the type of work they rely on to feed their families and support their lives. So we would suggest more coverage on unemployment insurance, on the gig economy, on economic mobility, on economic development, on the state and municipal kind of solutions to some of these problems. We would suggest a lot of focus on that, but not really talking about like the unemployment rate or how many people are applying for unemployment, really focused on the needs of the people who are unemployed or underemployed. So in Detroit, an example of that is that, you know, we've done a lot of reporting on the fraud detection system in Michigan's unemployment insurance system. The fraud detection system penalizes people in Detroit because of how they're flagged in an algorithm. It has flagged people who have gotten benefits from the state before. And again, this is like a solution, right? Because you can then say to the state, what's going on here? Why aren't people able to get through the system? And that's not about finding more money. That's about using information and gathering information in a way that allows people to get money that they are actually owed. So we would suggest that focusing on unemployment and underemployment. Severity is again linked to income. People's inability to provide for basic needs like food, rent, and transportation What is it that you could do to help that? Is it that you can offer people easily accessible info on where food distribution is happening every single day, right? Is it that you can help people access information about transportation options? Is it that you can help people access information about eviction prevention, eviction moratorium? Can you watch the housing court closely to make sure that they are, kind of abiding by the different moratoriums? That is what we would recommend for how to focus and alleviate some of those severe needs with information. Rarity, this one you'll have to look in the report for some more information about this, because this is just preliminary. But when we were looking at tax, and we always look at tax information and property information because it's something we can get in every city. When we look at Atlantic City is mostly renters. That's another reason why information needs won't be super prioritized and why information makes a lot of difference to people who are renting, because they can't necessarily trust their landlord for high quality information. So it's good to have somebody else in there who can provide high quality information. It looks to us that the city is assessing and collecting property taxes more from people whose properties are valued less. And there are people who have higher value properties who are not being collected on as often. That's something that we would really suggest. Again, that's preliminary. That's what we have so far. We didn't finish reporting this out. We would suggest that you all do to find out if people who have the most highly valued properties in Atlantic City are not carrying their fair share of the tax burden. So those are our recommendations. There's a lot more recommendations in there. One thing that I can tell you as well is that the people in Atlantic City who we surveyed said that they would prefer to have their information over text message. That was the most common response, especially information that they really need. They didn't say that they just want any information over text message. They said information that they really need, they would like it to come over text message. We have all of this for you. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Yeah, just let me know. And there's a lot more information in that report. But I will say that Atlantic City does not look different. I mean, it's very, every place is unique, but it doesn't look that different from Detroit, Stockton, Memphis, Newark, the other places that we've done these types of surveys. And the good news is that in all of those places, people have been able to use information to really chip away at some of this inequality and inequity, that there are ways to really attack these issues, even though they seem overwhelming, that there is a way to use information to really alleviate some of the suffering that that people are going through. Okay, next slide. I think I'm done.
I have a question from somebody in the chat. I think they sent it to me by mistake, but they want to know how have language barriers come into play with the data?
I am so glad you asked that. That is in the report. We would suggest that all the, any kind of information distribution be done in English and Spanish. We did not do our survey in Spanish. We'd be happy to do that and to get those responses. So yeah, we would definitely recommend that everything be dual language because of the high number of Spanish speakers in Atlantic City.
And then there's a question from Joe who says, did you notice any significant differences in how easy or difficult it was to reach people or get responses in Atlantic City versus Newark?
We did, but I think it's just because Atlantic City is so much smaller. We buy lists of phone numbers and we text people. We didn't see anybody coming in. So we didn't see anybody like learning about the tech survey and wanting to participate in Atlantic City. So that means that there's like a real opportunity to get more responses if this was publicized and if, you all said like, we really want to hear what information you need. So we're happy to keep the survey open and to work with that. The other thing I will say is that like this one, this is the info needs assessment we did closest to the election, and people were getting just bombarded with text spam. And we saw even in Detroit that our text messages, because we run this survey, we don't run this survey, we run a service that is functioning every single day, that even our engagement, which has been really consistent, was super down in the weeks before the election, because people are just sick of getting your texts. So I might suggest kind of giving people an opportunity to text in rather than receive something. And we'd be happy to add to, I think I put those results separately because it's a different moment in time and there's different challenges right now with the pandemic especially, but I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, I think we want to save space, right? So that we're going to go into breakout rooms. What we're going to do in these rooms, we are going to, we'd like to have everyone react, right, to these findings, but also we're going to think about what are the reasons, right? And because we have little time, it's the perfect opportunity for just a lightning round of what do we imagine today are the reasons that this is. And then our third prompt is what we're going to think about how we can move ahead. I'm going to now break everyone into breakout rooms. There will be a documentarian in the room. You all know who you are, the documentarians, and we're going to chart our thoughts too in that lightning round. We'll see you back in a few minutes. Clyde and Emmanuel, are you okay to not be in the breakout room?
Not to brag, but my group was pretty productive, you know. Just saying,
You get things done.
you know.
Okay.
We were having some pretty good conversation, and then we got snatched back. No, I'm sure everyone had some great conversation within their groups. You know, I felt invigorated, I feel rejuvenated, I feel like we are on the right path. I did want to save some space, Toby or Aaron, to meta communicate a bit, if there's anything we need to share in the group before we go into what's next.
Sure. Is there anything in particular that people feel compelled to be able to, you know, to bring forward from their breakout room that is worth the whole, you know, definitely the whole group needs to hear it?
Yeah, do you mind if I share one thing, Aaron? I'll be brief, as much as I can be brief. So one thing that, I mean, our group was pretty solid. It was me, Michael, Naima, and Dylan, and Christina. So one thing that I heard folks share, which I've heard before in AC, is that there have been so many reports done on Atlantic City. There have been so many white papers and data collected and all of that, but like, what's the plan of action to actually do something in response to that? And I think that that is a very real thing. And so like, while we can appreciate this information, we also want to know, like, well, what are we going to do about it? And so I just wanted to, I mentioned this to the group, but I also want to mention it to everyone. We'll talk about it in a minute, but you know, we do have a meeting plan for 3 weeks from now to get into that. And we know that 10 minutes to talk in response to this, or 15 minutes, is not enough time. And so, which is why we wanted to make sure that we had a follow-up meeting. So I just wanted to also say that up front for everyone too, that like, that's a very real thing. Everyone's feeling that.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that because there's people from all over the state on this call. And so, you know, we talked about, well, Atlantic City people in the surrounding area should focus on like these municipal solutions, but what are the statewide solutions? Like, what are they doing in Trenton? What's the governor's plan? What's the Department of Labor doing? That's a statewide thing that connects all of us. And so we'd be interested in talking more about investigating what the long-term and short-term recovery plans are. And then for all the Stockton people, right, because we have a lot of Stockton people, students are also disproportionately impacted by unemployment. So what are the ways, you know, a lot of them are not eligible for unemployment benefits and are, you know, living with their parents. So what are the ways we can use university resources to better inform students about job opportunities and internships? So that was another idea that came out of our group.
I can share if you guys are amenable to that. Is that cool? Okay. I had in my group was Megan, Victor, and Alicia. I hope I pronounced that correctly, and Ernie. And they brought up the really good point, two really good points that I want to highlight. One is that there should be some sort of platform, whether that be the city's website or something else, for activists and community organizers to sort of organize, because there is so much happening in Atlantic City that sometimes if you want to go to a food drive that's on Wednesday and there's another thing across the city that you want to go to, you're kind of torn between, you know, what you're doing, and we need to work smarter, not harder. So a lot of collaboration can come from that. And then also Ernie particularly was vocal about this, and I think it's a really good point, that the tax divide between corporate interests and citizens is very large, and that residents, particularly older working class residents, are really paying the bulk of taxes that keep the city afloat. And there needs to be a sort of accountability for the corporate interests that are not holding up their end. So yeah, really good thoughts, guys.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, I'm really interested in that because I think it's so nice to actually see that in paper. That's been an anecdotal information that's come out about the tax gap. But to really see that, you know, with the information is great. So that's what an opportunity. Okay, great. Any other last thoughts before we've got about 5 more minutes together?
I'll just say that we are going to meet again in 3 weeks. But people should feel free to connect with us in between then if they have a hot story idea or something that's more immediate. And especially if you have a resource or something that we can all be sharing for the community. So I'm going to drop my info in the chat, and I'm happy to pull people together in smaller conversations. Or if you just want to, explore an idea or a project, we are here for those discussions as well. Otherwise, I'll let Christina talk about the next steps.
Yes, thank you. So clearly we've done so much brainstorming today. We would love to continue this conversation. We do plan on hosting a meeting on December 4th at the same time, which is another Friday, at 11 a.m. So you'll start seeing some promo for that in the email pushes that we send out, as well as our social media. But like Vanessa said, in the meantime, please feel free to contact one of us if you have ideas already brewing that you want to get out, maybe expand on a bit. We're absolutely open to hearing what you have to offer, and that'll also help to kind of curate our next event, because we'll know specifically what to talk about, as that'll be a working meeting. So I'll also drop my email address in the chat, but of course there's Erin, Marissa, Vanessa, Toby as well, who you can feel free to contact. We're looking for, like we mentioned, project ideas, short-term and long-term solutions. So come prepared to work, people. And we want to hear from both community members and media partners. We need all of your contributions to really make this work and really make sure that it's comprehensive. You can go to the next slide. This is just our push. Of course, check out our website. You can find more information on things that we're working on, as well as our social media, which I think most of you are already on and following. And then lastly, I just wanted to leave you with a picture before we go to a lightning round, because I do want to save some minutes for a lightning round of information sharing. But this is what the real AC looks like. And even though we don't always see the positive side in media, we are a community that is tightly knit, and we need to work together to make sure everyone is getting what they need. So AC strong, guys, AC strong. We're gonna save the last few minutes, and I'm going to open up the floor to people on the call from organizations of the community. If you have any resources that you can share with us in just 1 to 2 minutes, just a lightning round of it that may help to supply people's immediate needs, please do so now. I'm going to pass it on. I do see Victor Moreno on the call. I know he wanted to share some information from ACCC, and then from there, we'll just pass it along.
Thank you, Christina. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victor Moreno. I'm actually the new manager of community outreach at Atlantic Capes, focusing at the Worthington Atlantic City campus. So through workforce development, I just want to share some news because someone brought up the Department of Labor. We recently were just awarded 2 grants that we just got notification this past week that is assisting some of our folks here in the Atlantic City area that have suffered from COVID-19 and have lost their employment or have substantially lost hours of work. So we are now providing, through these 2 grants, free workforce training for these folks, up to $4,000 to $5,000 per student. So it's not going to cost them anything. It's free. Anything in the hospitality industry, medical fields. We have just revamped our new programs, such as the medical assistant program, the paramedic program, as well, and a fundamentals cook program, which is a 1-year training program, which is also now eligible for financial aid, making our Atlantic City residents being eligible for free career training programs. So please, if you know anybody, send them to our website. I'm going to put the link up on the chat. Please let them know that there are now free workforce training programs available for our students in this community. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Victor. And yes, please drop links in the chat if you have them for those resources so we can send them right out. Anyone else?
I just want to talk a little bit about, there's a new rental assistance program, rental and mortgage assistance program that is giving grants for up to $10,000 for a 6-month period to low and moderate income. It's through the county. So I will drop that in the chat as well. Application started at 9 a.m. this morning.
This is not a resource, but because Erin and I responded to the text messages, we got people the information that they were asking about. It reminded me of one of the things that we saw that was really common which is access to transportation, especially people in the surrounding area, and how that affects their ability to work and find services. So that's just like another potential area of exploration. I just wanted to put that out there before I forgot.
Wait, that's really interesting. I'm in the environment program managing that. And right now the cumulative impacts and environmental justice bill is being turned into rulemaking. It's going to be an 18-month process. And one of the things that came out of the first thing that happened was the the executive order 23, is that every department agency has to have an environmental justice plan. So Department of Labor, Department of Transportation, there's an interagency council, and they're starting the process now of coordinating and responding to the environmental justice bill work, and so how it applies to their agency. That would be a statewide thing that would eventually work its way to Atlantic City, but thought that information might be useful.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. Anyone else have anything to share? I know we're on our time now, so thank you for those extra 2 minutes. But I just wanted to make sure I gave everyone a chance to share any resources that they may have. But if that's it, we can go ahead and wrap this up. Please save the date, December 4th, 11 o'clock. Feel free to bring some people with you, bring some folk, bring some community members, bring your coworkers. We are going to talk it through. We're going to work it out. We're going to really make some action steps to make this work. You know, we need to work together in this time. You know, 2020 has been a time. So this is the time we really need to come together and make sure everyone has their needs met. So thank you once again for joining us. Thank you again, Sarah and Vanessa and Mike from Free Press and Outlier Media for all the work that you've done. And thank you to my team members. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. And we will see you on December 4th.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Toby, take your time, okay?